Remember that time your neighbour's dog walker's cousin lost their job because suddenly nobody was buying houses? It felt like the world turned upside down overnight. One day everything seemed fine, and the next, the housing market collapsed, dragging the entire economy down with it. That wasn't just bad luck. It was a systemic failure. A perfect storm of bad decisions and risky financial practices that had been building up for years. That was the Great Recession, crashing into our lives like a rogue wave. It hit hard and fast, leaving devastation in its wake. The impact was felt across the globe, affecting millions of lives. People lost jobs, homes and savings. Families were uprooted and dreams were shattered. The foreclosure signs became a common sight in neighbourhoods, a stark reminder of the financial turmoil. The stock market went haywire. Traders were in a frenzy, trying to make sense of the chaos. The volatility was unprecedented and the losses were staggering. It was a collective oh crap moment for the global economy. Leaders and policymakers scrambled to find solutions, but the damage was already done. The ripple effects were felt in every corner of the world. The worst part, most people didn't see it coming. The signs were there, but they were either ignored or misunderstood. It was a harsh lesson in the importance of financial literacy and awareness. We were too busy watching cat videos on YouTube, blissfully unaware of the financial storm brewing. The distractions of everyday life kept us from seeing the bigger picture. It was a stark reminder that even in the age of the internet, what we don't know can still hurt us. Information was available, but it wasn't always accessible or understandable to the average person. But hey, at least we had cat videos, right? They provided a much-needed escape from the harsh realities of the world. In times of crisis, sometimes a little humour and distraction can go a long way in helping us cope. Despite the hardships, communities came together. People supported each other, shared resources, and found ways to rebuild. It was a testament to human resilience and the power of solidarity. Experts and policymakers worked tirelessly to stabilize the economy and prevent future crises. Lessons were learned and measures were put in place to safeguard against similar events. In the end, we emerged stronger and more aware. The Great Recession was a wake-up call, a reminder of the fragility of our financial systems and the importance of vigilance. As we move forward, let's not forget the lessons of 2008. Let's stay informed, stay prepared, and support each other through whatever challenges may come our way, because together we can weather any storm. Imagine a balloon being inflated, growing larger and larger with each breath. This balloon is filled with easy credit and risky loans, expanding rapidly. That's the housing bubble in a nutshell, a fragile sphere of inflated expectations. House prices soared to unprecedented heights, fueled by cheap mortgages and the belief that the market would keep climbing. People thought they were getting rich on paper at least. Their homes were worth more and more, creating an illusion of wealth. It was like a game of musical chairs, everyone scrambling to buy before the music stopped. The frenzy was palpable, with buyers rushing to secure properties. Banks, eager to cash in on the booming market, handed out mortgages like candy on Halloween. They were in a lending frenzy, approving loans with little regard for the borrower's ability to repay. Little did they know, or maybe they did, those sneaky devils, that these loans were ticking time bombs. The risk was hidden beneath layers of financial jargon and complex instruments. When the music finally stopped, a lot of people were left holding the bag, or rather, the mortgage they could no longer afford. The dream of home ownership turned into a nightmare of foreclosure and financial ruin. Neighbourhoods were dotted with foreclosure signs, homes abandoned and left to decay. The impact was felt far and wide, not just by homeowners but by entire communities. The housing bubble burst triggered a chain reaction, leading to a stock market crash and a severe economic downturn. It wasn't just about houses, it was about the entire financial system teetering on the brink. Governments around the world scrambled to respond, implementing bailouts and recovery efforts to stabilize the economy. The road to recovery was long and arduous, with many lessons learned along the way. Slowly but surely, people began to rebuild, holding on to hope for a better future. The crisis served as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked speculation and the importance of financial responsibility. In the end, it wasn't just about houses. It was about people, families and communities coming together to weather the storm and emerge stronger on the other side. Subprime mortgages sounds fancy, right? It's just a fancy way of saying risky loans to people who probably couldn't afford them. Imagine giving a credit card with a $100,000 limit to someone who makes $20,000 a year. That's subprime lending in a nutshell. These loans were bundled together and sold off to investors as safe investments. Wall Street, always eager to make a quick buck, turned a blind eye to the risks. They were too busy throwing money at anything that moved to notice the ticking time bomb hidden in the fine print. Wall Street loves a good gamble. It's a place where fortunes are made and lost in the blink of an eye, where the thrill of the next big win keeps traders on the edge of their seats. But instead of betting on horses or roulette wheels, they were betting on houses. Yes, you heard that right, houses. The very places where people live, raise families and build their lives. They created complex financial instruments based on those risky mortgages. These instruments, known as mortgage-backed securities, were supposed to be safe investments, but in reality they were anything but. Think of it like betting on whether your neighbour's dog will learn to fly. Not exactly a sure thing. These financial products were built on shaky foundations, and it was only a matter of time before the cracks began to show. Homeowners, many of whom were given loans they couldn't afford, were the unwitting participants in this high-stakes game. They were promised the American dream, but what they got was a nightmare. When the housing bubble burst, these bets went south and Wall Street went into meltdown. The value of these mortgage-backed securities plummeted, and the financial institutions that held them were left holding the bag. The news was filled with stories of banks failing, stock markets crashing, and people losing their homes. It was a financial apocalypse, and no one was spared. Banks and financial institutions, once considered too big to fail, were suddenly on the brink of collapse. The very foundations of the global financial system were shaking, and the world watched in horror. Governments around the world scrambled to respond. Bailouts were announced, and emergency measures were put in place to try and stabilize the situation. But the damage was done. It was like watching a game of Jenga, except the tower was the global economy, and the loser was, well, all of us. The ripple effects of the crisis were felt far and wide, affecting millions of lives and changing the financial landscape forever. In the aftermath, there was anger and outrage. People took to the streets to protest against the greed and recklessness that had led to the crisis. They demanded accountability and change. Reforms were proposed, and new regulations were put in place to try and prevent such a disaster from happening again. But the scars of the crisis remain, a stark reminder of the dangers of betting big on houses. The Great Recession wasn't just America's problem. It was like a contagious virus, spreading across the globe faster than you can say subprime mortgage. Countries that relied on exports to the US saw their economies crumble. Global trade plummeted and unemployment soared. It was a stark reminder that we live in an interconnected world, for better or for worse. When one part of the global economy catches a cold, everyone else gets the sniffles. The Great Recession showed us that economic problems don't respect borders, languages, or even common sense. Faced with economic Armageddon, governments around the world scrambled for solutions. Cue the bailouts and stimulus packages. Trillions of dollars were pumped into the financial system to prevent a complete meltdown. Was it the right thing to do? The jury's still out on that one. Some argue that the bailouts saved the global economy from utter collapse. Others say it was a handout to Wall Street fat cats who should have known better. Either way, it was a massive intervention in the free market, and its long-term consequences are still being debated today. Behind the graphs and economic jargon, there were real people whose lives were turned upside down. Families lost their homes, their savings, their livelihoods. The American dream, once a beacon of hope, suddenly seemed like a cruel joke. The emotional toll of the recession was immeasurable. Stress, anxiety and depression skyrocketed. The social fabric of communities was torn apart. The Great Recession was a stark reminder that economic downturns are not just about numbers, they are about people's lives. So, what did we learn from this whole mess? Did we learn to avoid risky lending practices? Did we rein in Wall Street's excesses? Did we finally figure out how to prevent economic bubbles from forming? The answer, unfortunately, is a resounding maybe. Some reforms were put in place, but were they enough? Only time will tell. One thing's for sure, though, history has a nasty habit of repeating itself, especially when we're not paying attention. The Great Recession was a wake-up call. It reminded us that economic stability is not a given. It's something we need to constantly work towards. We need to be vigilant, to question assumptions, and to speak out against reckless financial practices. We can't afford to be passive observers in our own economic lives. We need to educate ourselves about finance, hold our leaders accountable, and demand policies that promote sustainable and equitable growth. In short, we need to stay awake at the wheel. The Great Recession was a defining moment of the 21st century. It exposed the flaws in our financial system, the fragility of our global economy, and the human cost of economic recklessness. But it also reminded us of our resilience, our capacity for compassion, and our ability to learn from our mistakes. The Great Recession was a cautionary tale, a reminder that we must never forget the lessons of the past, lest we be doomed to repeat them in the future. And that's the word.